Now, we've said multiple times the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. The moon is an airless world. So this lecture is talking about the lunar atmosphere. So how can I say it has an atmosphere? Well, really, turns out that there's a tiny, tiny thin gas around the moon. It's really not so much an atmosphere as more like an exosphere around the Earth. It is individual molecules and atoms that are just kind of hanging around the moon. Some of them are going around the moon, some are bouncing off the surface, some are just there. Now, where's this coming from? It is so thin, it's really thinner than the space where the space station is flying, or orbiting the Earth. So it's like, it's really not fair to call it an atmosphere, but then you got to have some term to describe this cloud of gas around there. The pressure is 10 to the minus 11 atmospheres, so it's about 10, trillionths of one of the Earth's atmosphere. So it's really a tiny little thing. Now, where does it come from? Well, it is due to a handful of atoms and molecules around the moon. Some of them are outgassing from volcanic activity. Even if the moon doesn't have current volcanic activity, it does have past volcanic activity, and volcanic gases are trapped in some of the rocks. And over time, as the moon orbits the Earth and changes how the sun's hitting it, it gets hot and cold, the rocks expand and contract, and they crack, and they release some of these trapped gases. And they hang around for a little bit before they achieve escape velocity and leave. Collisions. Things run into the moon. Meteorites, asteroids, comets, fractions of these things. And many of these things actually have a little bit of gas trapped in them or water vapor or something, and that hangs around for a little bit as well. The other thing is that you have radioactive decay. So the collisions bring in stuff, and then radioactive decay, one type of radioactive decay called alpha radiation actually produces alpha particles, which are like helium nuclei. And so you can get a little bit of gases produced that way. The other thing that can happen is that solar wind particles and energetic particles from the sun slamming into the moon can knock atoms loose on the surface of the moon. We call that process sputtering. Or you can actually capture these things. The solar wind particles can be captured by the moon's gravity temporarily and orbit around as just stray gases. So there are several different sort of things here that can be there. Now, the gases do heat up and they do leave over time. The escape velocity of the moon is very low, and so these gases will leave. They don't instantly leave, though. The moon has enough gravity to hold on to gases for a while. It's really the more energetic ones that are leaving. So it's more like the atmosphere is evaporating away rather than just all leaving at once. And so even if you just had go into the moon with enough gas to cylinders to give it an atmosphere, it would last for a little while before it would eventually all go away. It would leak off into space for sure, but it would last for a while. So that does suggest that you get a comet that runs into the moon, and the comet has carbon dioxide, water vapor, ammonia, methane, and carbon monoxide, and various other sort of frozen things in there. The heat of the impact will vaporize all that stuff, and you will have a temporary atmosphere made up of these very thin things floating around the moon, and then they will eventually leave, but they will be around for a little while. And so that is the atmosphere that the moon has. The Apollo astronauts, when they landed on the moon, they had instruments that they set up that monitored the atmosphere of the moon for a while. And so we were able to actually verify that there are a few gases that do hang around there. Not enough to really call it an atmosphere as you think of an atmosphere, because it is thinner, like I said, than the space where the space shuttle was orbiting, or where the space station is orbiting. It's thinner than it's thinner than the space where the outer space where a lot of the satellites orbit the Earth. So it's very, very thin. And again, like I said, it's very unfair to really call that an atmosphere, though we do. Uh, Analysis of the moon rocks brought back by the astronauts does indicate that the atmosphere may have been thicker in the past. how would that happen? Well, remember all that volcanic activity in the early moon's history? That would have been releasing an enormous amount of gas, and that gas would have taken a while to leave. So during that period of time before it all left, the moon would have had a thin atmosphere. Now, how thick is thicker? Well, it's still probably going to be 1/50th, or in other words, 2% of Earth's atmospheric pressure. That's still not much of an atmosphere. That would still be close to a vacuum. And so it's even when it had a thicker atmosphere in the past, it really wasn't much of an atmosphere. And so, that would have been very early in the moon's history, when it was volcanically more active and then producing all these gases that took a little while to leach off into space.